Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Meet Up with Mallory. I'm State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and this is our live virtual coffee hour that we do just about every single week that the Senate is in session. It is a great way for you to get updates on what's happening in the state of Michigan, get an update on what's happening in the legislature. We share some good news from the district and do live Q&A. So if you are joining us, we live stream this across Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So no matter what platform you're joining, welcome. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to type them in the comment section. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, to type your name in case that's not obvious by your screen name, what city you are commenting in from, and go ahead with your question or comment. So with that, we will jump right into it before it gets too hot for everybody to go outside. First up, there was some news on Tuesday. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson announced significant changes to the operations of Secretary of State branch offices to address many of the pain points that Michiganders who have sometimes had to wait for months to get an appointment have expressed. A lot of this is due to the backlog of expirations that have piled up throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. There has been legislation that has passed a number of times to extend the validity of licenses and registrations to make sure that if your license expires, you are not held liable if you can't get an appointment. So the Secretary of State knows this. I had a meeting with Secretary of State Benson this week to talk about some of the changes, and we've also heard directly from you. We have helped a significant number of constituents work through issues with the Secretary of State, getting an appointment, getting some of your issues and disability placards and license renewals worked out. So we know that that is an issue. But the changes coming into effect include adding an additional 350,000 appointment slots, giving priority to disabled residents in need of handicap placards or service, and there will be greeters. So if you do want to go physically to a Secretary of State branch office without making an appointment, there will be somebody on site to greet you for many things, especially if it's simple and you've got your documentation all prepared. They will be able to look, and if there's an appointment opening immediately, they will be able to see you immediately. But this person will also be on hand to assist you in making an appointment if you need to make an appointment and maybe come back later that day or the next day or in a week or whatever it may be. So I know that there has been a push to return to the way things used to be. For those who aren't aware, Secretary Benson really wants the Secretary of State offices to be by appointment only. And we've heard from some people who say, I just want to go and I want to wait in line. We know that it's been difficult to get an appointment, and we'll keep an eye to see if this change helps significantly, because that is a concern of ours as well as somebody who represents you. But the shift to appointment only, and I give Secretary Benson a lot of respect for this, was an idea that was bubbled up directly from staff. So people who are working every single day at Secretary of State branch offices, who said that it has made their ability to do their jobs much more efficient because people are coming prepared. They're coming with the documentation that they know they need, rather than getting to a Secretary of State branch office, potentially waiting in line for hours, growing more and more frustrated, as we all do when we're waiting, and then getting up to the desk and maybe even being turned away. So you can imagine the tension and frustration between you as a resident and the person working at the Secretary of State branch office. If you're already frustrated and angry, you get up to the front desk and you don't have that paperwork that you need to fulfill your transaction. So they've reported that the appointment system has actually made their jobs much better. There have been surveys done of people who have utilized Secretary of State branch offices who now rate their experience as pleasant and really positive, which is a marked change from, I think, our normal experience waiting all day at the Secretary of State. So I think it's a step in the right direction. We know there's still work to be done. There was legislation that moved this week to require that there are at least 25 hours per week of in-person service at the Secretary of State branch offices that I supported. I split from the Democratic caucus. We were split on that to support this legislation. But I do think it's a work in progress, and I'm really grateful for Secretary Benson for meeting with us this week and walking us through that. And a reminder, so I'm going to share my screen to just a reminder of all the things that you don't need to go into a branch office to do anymore. So really, the only service that you need to go in physically to a branch office now is if you need a new photo for your license. And now that is no longer required for, I believe, 4 years. So that length of time has been lengthened. Or if you need to transfer title of a vehicle and have the documentation in hand. Outside of that, you can pretty much do everything online. So if you go to michigan.gov/SOS, you can see online services, renew your registration, renew your license, order a license plate, replacement tabs, change your address. And then if you haven't visited the self-service kiosks, they are located at a lot of Kroger's or Meijer locations. They're actually really, really easy to use, and you can do a significant number of transactions there as well without having to wait in line. So work in progress. We will update you with more as we have it. And if you have additional concerns, that's something that my staff can help with related to the Secretary of State. And we have been working with a number of constituents to troubleshoot issues that you have been having. But hopefully opening 350,000 new appointments will help alleviate a lot of that backlog. Up next, Governor Whitmer announced an investment plan in state parks, a $250 million investment plan to upgrade state parks and trails as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. At a press conference this week, the DNR director actually said that in 2020, 35 million people visited state parks in Michigan, which is a 30% increase from the year before. So, just thinking about all the things that we were able to do or not do during COVID, a lot of people got outside and socially distanced and enjoyed the state parks. So this plan would leverage some of the federal funds coming down from the American Rescue Plan, and Michigan is receiving $6.5 billion in federal stimulus from the American Rescue Plan. And unlike the CARES Act funding, which was federal funding that needed to be used to respond directly to COVID-19. So testing, vaccines, all of those sorts of things. The American Rescue Plan is really to help states and the country emerge from COVID-19 and the pandemic stronger than we were before. And that's stimulating the economy, getting people back to work, all of those sorts of things. So investing in our state parks is a way to boost tourism, to continue seeing the record number of people visiting our state parks that we've seen. And the state noted in this press conference that there's currently a backlog of $264 million in parks maintenance requests, which includes upgrading water and sanitary systems, preserving historical structures, and fixing vital park infrastructure. So this was introduced this week. I think it's a great plan. I am somebody who spends a lot of time at our state parks and pays for the little tab on your license plate that gets you into all the state parks. It's a great deal if you haven't signed up for that. But this plan is subject to the approval of the legislature. All right, moving into updates from the Capitol. I'm just going to dive in right away with a video.
And we're going to start by continuing our coverage of the next portion of Michigan's auto no-fault reform law goes into effect after July 1st.
Survivors of catastrophic car crashes say the changes could mean losing access to medical care that they desperately need. Michael Martin has been following this story closely. He's live from the Capitol with a closer look at how families are now pushing lawmakers to consider a legislative fix. Michael?
Yeah, Janice, Doug, a busy day here at the Capitol. Just a few hours ago, the lawn behind me full of hundreds of people, survivors of catastrophic auto crashes, and their loved ones urging action from lawmakers. They say these changes coming after July 1st will devastate Michigan's medical care industry and prevent them from having access to the care they so badly need.
We want them to understand what's going to happen to these people and what they can do to make it better.
Maureen Howell, her husband, former state rep Jim Howell, and their son Sam are just one family among thousands, terrified at what changes coming to Michigan's no-fault auto law could mean in terms of their son having access to medical care he needs.
We found that there are senators and representatives that really haven't been exposed to the bill that we're wanting to see passed.
Yeah! And so on Wednesday, they and hundreds of other auto crash survivors and their loved ones gathered at the state capitol to deliver a message to lawmakers. We can't wait for the reform bill to take effect. They want lawmakers to take action now before it's too late.
It is incredibly moving to see everybody here because that's what we need. And I don't know how my colleagues could turn a blind eye to this. This is something that should be a simple fix and that we have to do, and we have to do before we go out on break.
As part of the changes coming after July 1st, a new set of medical fee schedules will take effect, meaning insurance companies will have to reimburse just 55% of what they were covering back in January of 2019 for any medical care service not covered in our federal Medicare law.
Right now, there's about 18,000 people or so currently in the no-fault system that could be impacted. Of those, you got about 1,600 that are directly squarely in the middle that could be immediately impacted.
A study by a firm called ROI Insights predicts the cuts will cause 5,000 people in the industry to lose their jobs and cause over 6,000 patients to lose access to care within a year. Lawmakers are saying, businesses aren't really going to be impacted in this. They won't be impacted in their ability to provide care. What's your take on this?
Well, we will. I don't know what businesses they're talking about.
Bob Milinaric, owner of First Call Home Healthcare, explains how the cuts will directly impact his financials.
What I charge for a TBI patient to take care of, I charge $28. They want to pay us $15.20, and I'm paying my aides $16 and $17. And that doesn't include payroll taxes and workers' comp and liability and, all the office expense and overhead.
His company would effectively lose money every day if they would continue to provide the care they have been after the bill takes effect. And so survivors urging lawmakers to take action now on two bills already in the legislature, Senate Bill 314 and House Bill 4486. Governor Whitmer offering support for a potential fix at a press conference on Tuesday.
I have indicated to the legislative leadership that I am open to having a conversation around narrowly addressing some of the rate issues.
But the survivors and their families weren't the only ones making moves around the Capitol Wednesday.
We can't wait to see the numbers. This is one of my favorite things now. People say, we'll just see the numbers. You are not a number. These people up here are not a number.
A bipartisan group of current and former lawmakers held a press conference to say when they helped pass the auto no-fault reform law, they never intended for it to be applied retroactively.
The reforms passed 2 years ago were a start, but not the end of this process. We need to make sure that we keep the promise to those injured and suffering.
73 in all, not all in attendance Wednesday, but supporting the position in what's called an amicus brief, a court filing that will accompany a lawsuit in the works that questions the constitutionality of the changes coming with the reform.
I don't think they did know. And I think it's brave of them to admit their mistake and to do something about it. And that's all we're wanting them to do.
And lawmakers Wednesday crediting the efforts of these survivor advocates for creating and maintaining momentum around the issue. What impact have these families had on your ability to make this push, to see all these people gathering at a groundswell level? What sort of impact has that had on you as lawmakers?
Without this kind of knowledge and without the experiences you have shared, I think this fight would be 10 times harder. So it's incredibly important for us to continue to hear from you. And I encourage everybody here to contact their legislator, your local legislator, but also, importantly, contact those people who set the agenda.
Yeah, and so that lawsuit we mentioned.
So this was something just to give people background on this, Oakland County has had a pretty consistent track record of voting against so-called no-fault reform in the way that it was presented in 2019. So very similarly to my Republican predecessors and one of the loudest people speaking out about this issue, Brooks Patterson, who I don't agree with very much of where he stood policy-wise, but I voted against the no-fault reform bill in 2019. And the reason, as a member who serves on the Insurance and Banking Committee, is that what was put forward at the time was a bill that we knew benefited the insurance industry but didn't consider the voices of families who were impacted, did not consider anybody who was affected by a catastrophic car accident. Throughout the months of testimony that we had on the original bill, families were turned away. They weren't allowed to testify by the committee chair. But we heard from insurance company after insurance company after insurance company about how this reform would create more competition. But Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan came out this week, who was also a loud proponent of this, and understandably so, because of the staggeringly high car insurance rates, not only in the state of Michigan, but particularly in Detroit. The number of Detroit residents who can't afford car insurance. But he said this week that the result of the bill has not resulted in lower car insurance rates for his residents. So what is in front of the legislature right now is a very narrow fix that would fix the fee schedule for in-home or direct care workers or facilities that I think is needed right now. And then the amicus brief letter that I signed on to, along with 72 other current and former lawmakers, encourages the courts to take a look at how this law is being interpreted, because it was not intended to be retroactive. We all, residents of Michigan who have been required to have no-fault auto insurance, have been paying into the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association, which is sitting on right now about $20 billion of funds that we have paid into that system. But without that fix, the people who are currently benefiting from the Catastrophic Claims Fund, who need a lifetime of care because of their catastrophic injuries as a result of an auto accident, they will be cut off on July 1st. So I hope the courts will take swift action. I hope the legislature will take swift action, but we will keep people posted on this. And I encourage you, as your auto insurance plans are up for renewal, you may see that they've included documentation to alert you that there is a new law. Make sure you read everything. Make sure you understand the difference between the different levels of coverage. And if you can afford the unlimited coverage, we don't know how long that coverage will exist, honestly, because if this fundamentally changes the insurance market, it may not be something that insurance companies want to provide once they are no longer legally obligated to. But, this is something where the cost savings of maybe a couple dollars a month, in my mind, aren't worth giving up a potential for lifetime coverage. And a lot of people aren't aware that your health insurance does not cover a lot of the in-home care that the Catastrophic Claims Association or NoFault would cover in the case of an auto accident. Obviously, we all hope we are never in that position where we have to use it, but we hope that it's there if it does. So we will keep everybody posted. And I want to thank everybody who has reached out or commented and expressed that they're glad that we continue to kind of stay on this. So we will move forward from there. All right. Next up, this is an issue that we heard from a number of you as well. And it's kind of a strange issue when you think about it, but there was a bill up in the legislature yesterday that would change the makeup and prohibit anybody from the Lower Peninsula from serving on the Wolf Advisory Council for the state of Michigan. So this is something where the entire current population of wolves in the state of Michigan is in the Upper Peninsula. But that doesn't mean that people in the Lower Peninsula are not concerned about wolves. We know that many people within our district, residents of our district, spend a significant amount of time in the Upper Peninsula, are conservationists, who are people who love nature and protecting our wildlife. So Senator Ed McBroom spoke on this bill yesterday and encouraged prohibiting anybody from the Lower Peninsula from serving on the state's Wolf Management Advisory Council. But we heard from a number of you. I voted no on this bill because there are concerns that changing the makeup of the council and not allowing residents from the entire state to serve on this council would tip the scales in favor of those who support wolf hunting and away from those who are conservationists and those who are concerned about the wolf population. And actually around the country, we've seen legislation similar to this result in the majority of other states' wolf populations being killed in record time, including a bill in Idaho that would allow 90% of the wolf population to be killed, while Wisconsin saw 200 wolves killed in 1 week, which far exceeded the limit set by the state and forced the end of a week-long wolf hunt. They had to end it 4 days early because there was such a concern that they were effectively going to drive wolves into extinction in their state. And that was something that we saw reported in March as well. So even though I voted no on this bill passed along party lines with all Republicans in support of this bill to prohibit those from the Lower Peninsula from serving on this council. So we will keep you all posted on news there. All right, now we are going to jump into good news. So let me go ahead and share this presentation. First up in good news, 3 Michigan schools won the 2021 National School of Character Awards. And the 3 are all from our district. So we just absolutely dominated in this section. And I'm really, really proud to honor Hart Middle School in Rochester, Bemis Elementary, and Troy Union Elementary, both from Troy. So congratulations on earning the National Schools of Character. And we are so, so proud that all of these students and all of these schools came from our district, which is no surprise, no bias at all there. Up next, there is an exciting event coming up and a very important one. Cyclists celebrate men's health with an event coming up at Griffin Claw Brewing in Birmingham. Birmingham urologist Michael Lutz will host a huge expo with disease screenings for Metro Detroit men in need. Months before this massive undertaking happens, he likes to hold a few smaller events to make sure that the expo has the funds it needs to help cover as many men as possible. And that's where you come in if you are a cyclist or somebody who just loves beer here in Birmingham. So the event will happen on Monday, June 14th, when local cyclists will get together for a ride and a beer at the annual Cogs and Kegs fundraiser. After a hiatus last year because of COVID-19 shutdowns, the event is back to raise awareness for men's health issues and also to raise money to support medical care for neighbors through the Men's Health Foundation, which was founded by Lutz. If you're interested for more information, you can visit miumenshealthfoundation.org/cogs and kegs, or just visit, once again, it's miumenshealthfoundation.org. And last up in good news this week, and some visual eye candy to take into your Friday. Berkeley, in case you haven't visited Berkeley or driven around Berkeley or walked around Berkeley over the past few years, Berkeley has an amazing collection of murals, and there is now a new one to add to the murals in the city of Berkeley. Salon Simply Beautiful on Coolidge Highway installed a new mural on the side of the building in April. The art covers the entire wall and features a woman amid cherry blossoms and cog wheels. Owner Nikki Maybe had been wanting a mural on her salon for more than a year, and she actually had one commissioned in 2020, but it was delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe decided to bring back the idea of a mural this year and brought in Pontiac artist Zach Curtis to paint the piece. So go check it out, walk around Berkeley. It's beautiful, and nice work to owner Nikki Maybe and Salon Simply Beautiful for adding this Simply Beautiful mural to the side of the building. That is it for our news for the week. So we are going to bring on, I need a new introduction this week. Last week I said you know her from when I was out on maternity leave, but welcome to the one and only Director of Constituent Relations, Elizabeth Trombley.
Yeah, you're like saying a new introduction. I'm like, Liz, you know, that's my new intro.
Nice. So a reminder, we are in the Q&A portion. This is live. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments section, whether you are on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. They all funnel to us. Make sure to type your name if that is not obvious in your screen name, what city you are currently in or representing, and fire away with your question. And then Liz will read the questions out loud, and I will do my best to answer them, or we'll let you know if it's something that we don't know at the moment, and we'll follow up with you via email. So Liz, what do we got this week?
Yeah, we have one question so far, and it's from Josh from Berkeley on Facebook. And this might be one we need to circle back on, but they asked a question about zoning reform. They said in Connecticut, they recently signed into law zoning reforms, which include legalizing accessory dwelling units / accessory apartments by rights in all municipalities. Would you support a similar reform at the state level? And then they provided a link for us.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, there isn't something that is currently circulating in Michigan that is similar. But we've been talking, I forget what forum or conference I was on recently, where we were talking about affordable housing. And one of the issues that I brought up, people were talking about tax issues and all of these sorts of things. And I brought up zoning. We have had zoning laws throughout our communities since the beginning of zoning went into effect. And a lot of zoning regulations have really discriminatory histories. And it's something that I think our state really needs to look into reforming to allow for more multifamily dwellings. We have a lot of people who want to age in place. And for a personal version of this story, I grew up with my grandmother who had MS, and we built an apartment for her on our house. So she lived with us my entire childhood, which was really wonderful. And I know that would be something that a lot of our residents would want to do, so that there could be an opportunity for a parent to move in, potentially with a child, or vice versa, if you have a child moving back in with you to help care for you, that I think we need to look into allowing. There was a package of affordable housing bills that moved through economic development this week, which is a committee that I serve on, which I was proud to support. But one of the things that I wish it had included, and I hope that we can continue to work on, are issues around Headley as well. So right now, there's a crazy statistic out there that there are more realtors in the United States than there are homes for sale. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. If anybody has tried to buy a house recently, it is absolutely nuts on the market. But we know that there are a lot of residents in our communities who maybe are retired or want to move closer to downtown where they can walk to things, live in an apartment. But the tax implications for doing that, because of the way Headley currently works with the roll-up, makes it prohibitive. You would actually pay more in taxes to sell an older home that maybe you've been in for a few decades, move into an apartment, and be taxed at a higher rate, even though it's a smaller, multifamily apartment. So we'll have to look into specific legislation, but I'm keeping an eye on it. And I do think, Josh, that we have to really examine zoning laws in our communities and make sure that they are as accessible to as many people as possible, and better for the environment and all that sort of stuff. So, Liz, what's next?
Yeah. Thanks, Josh, for the question. That is the only one that I'm seeing right now. So
all
I
right,
have nothing right now.
Okay, so we will. Oh, I see some additional questions popping in. Do you see them on your end, Liz?
Oh, I see them now. They just came in now. Yeah.
Looks
Okay,
like
so Connie.
So if you've got questions, again,
Yeah.
type your name if it's not obvious by your screen name, what city you are representing, and fire away with your question.
Okay. Now that my screen has loaded, Connie from Royal Oak said, is there anything happening locally or in MI overall around voting processes, suppression, avoidance?
Connie, great question. We talked about this last week. There is a bill package, 39 bills were introduced by legislative Republicans, and I wish this wasn't a partisan issue, but this is how it's playing out right now, to supposedly secure elections. But a lot of what has been introduced would make it significantly harder to vote, and would also make our elections potentially less secure. So taking a step back, in 2018, Michiganders voted overwhelmingly, at almost 70% of voters voting in support of Prop 3, which greatly expanded access to the ballot. It put in things like no reason absentee voting, same-day registration, and that these are all things that are supported. And historically, those who have most taken advantage of absentee ballots, for example, have been seniors, people who it is harder to get out to the polls. So there are a number of bills that would make it significantly harder to access an absentee ballot, including one that I'm very concerned about, which would require sending in a copy of your ID in the mail to your clerk in order to get an absentee ballot. Some people have said, well, we need, a voter ID requirement in Michigan. Michigan already has a voter ID requirement in place by law. You either have to show your ID, a government ID, or sign an affidavit confirming your identity. And it is illegal to sign an affidavit knowingly, incorrectly, to pretend to be somebody else. And just to put kind of the issue in context, the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, has found since 2007, 12, not 12,000, not 1,200, 12 confirmed cases of voter fraud in the state of Michigan. So thinking about the millions of people who vote, especially in presidential election years, this is a very, 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 very minor issue. And we have a legal system in place to deal with instances of voter fraud. So those bills are moving. They are being pushed through committees. I know that the governor stands opposed to them. I am opposed to them. There is also a push potentially for a ballot initiative to take some of the bills from this package and run it as a ballot initiative, which would potentially set up a situation whereby if they collect enough signatures for a ballot initiative, we have what's called adopt and amend in the legislature, where once there's a ballot initiative that is proposed, if it has collected enough signatures, which is 4% of the population, the voting population from the last, we get into how the numbers calculated. But if they collect enough signatures, the legislature effectively has the first crack at it. So the legislature can take a look at the ballot proposal and say, we are either going to adopt this and amend it, we can change it and put it into law ourselves, or we can put it to the ballot. Now, if the legislature chooses to adopt a ballot initiative, they can effectively gut it, claim that it's the same law. We saw this happen with the ballot initiative that I believe was running in 2016 or 2018, My Time to Care for earned paid sick leave, that the legislature took and gutted, but still called it the same law. And if they run through that process, it is veto proof. So the legislature can pass it and the governor cannot veto something. So that is a potential avenue for these election bills to move through. And it's frankly just so disappointing because the people promoting many of these bills are misleading people to think that our election system is somehow broken, that it is insecure, when we saw dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits get thrown out for lack of evidence. And we saw canvases secure the vote. We had over 250 audits done in the state of Michigan, and we hear the term forensic audit thrown out quite a bit recently. There was a forensic audit done in Antrim County. A forensic audit just means that you physically kind of get your hands on the ballots and the machines and everything. That was done, and it confirmed the vote in Antrim County, and it confirmed the vote all throughout the state. So we're going to keep an eye on it. We'll keep people alerted on as to what you can do. But really, I think a lot of this is coming down to sharing accurate information. And one of the things that I'm proud that we did ahead of the 2020 election is we hosted an Ask a Clerk virtual town hall that was both Republican and Democratic. We wanted to make sure that we were just sharing accurate information with two of our clerks from around our district. That was great because a lot of people had a lot of questions just about, what happens if I use a Sharpie instead of a pen? What happens if I send in a blank ballot, which is something that you could legally do?
Yeah, you lose the sleeve.
Yeah, you can turn in a blank ballot if you lost the sleeve. People had a lot of questions, and we wanted to make sure we had answers for people. But I think that people are now taking advantage of people's fear and playing it up for their own personal gain, which is incredibly scary for us. So that's what's happening right now. The bills are moving. I'm sure we'll talk about this significantly more. And Connie, I see a follow-up question about what constituents can do. sign up to follow these bills. I know Voters Not Politicians has been doing work in this area, and making sure that if there is a ballot initiative that is run, that we tell people that they are being marketed due, and encouraging people not to sign.
Okay, so finally got the comments rolling in through my computer. So Jan from on Facebook from Rochester wants to know more about the auto insurance fix. Would the insurance fix legislation only apply to those currently receiving services? And they follow up and say, if I have opted for unlimited coverage on my insurance, would providers be paid differently for services for newly catastrophically injured as opposed to those being currently provided services?
Yeah, Jan, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. If you have unlimited coverage, but it sounds like you haven't been in a catastrophic accident so far, thank goodness, but let's hope that always remains the case. But say, for example, you find yourself in the situation of getting into a catastrophic accident down the line after July 1st, you would fall under the law that was passed in 2019, which would greatly restrict and put in a fee schedule for care providers at a significantly lower rate than what care providers were able to charge before. And listen, there can be debates about who were good actors and bad actors, and were there companies who were overcharging for these services. But if you look at right now is a perfect example. There is a labor shortage happening, and we are seeing businesses from restaurants all the way up struggling to find workers. And I think a lot of people coming out of the pandemic realized, I need more out of my work. If I'm going to go to a job that requires as much labor as a job does, I want to be paid fairly. I want to make sure I can pay my bills and have savings and buy a home and accumulate wealth. So I think people are really taking a hard look at what they're willing to accept out of a job. So we are now seeing fast food restaurants, Chipotle notably, raised all of their salaries to above $15. And it makes it really hard if you are an in-home healthcare provider. You are somebody who is personally responsible for the life of another person, whether it is caring for somebody who's catastrophically injured, whether you're a nanny, you're caring for somebody's child. This is a job sector of care that we have radically undervalued in this country forever. And it's also no coincidence that most of these jobs are done by women. So there's a much larger conversation to be had. But Jan, going back to your question, there are in-home healthcare providing companies who are concerned that they will not be able to hire or retain qualified employees at $15 an hour, because if given the choice between working at a Target or being responsible for somebody's life at their home, you're probably going to take the less stressful job at $15 an hour. A lot of in-home healthcare providers were paying their workers $25, $28, $30 an hour. And it is a concern. So it is a concern of mine that we are going to see many of these companies close because they won't be able to either staff up or afford to pay what they wanted to pay before. But that is a very long-winded answer of saying, yes, if you get catastrophically injured from July 1st on forward, you are subject to the much greater restrictions that were put into the 2019 NoFault Reform law.
Okay. And I said this once before, but now I do not see any more questions. So that is it, I think, for now.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I know that it's a hard ask to pop in and join us virtually when the weather is so nice. I know it's getting hot and sticky out, but it's beautiful. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Get out there, enjoy it, support small businesses now that more and more of us are getting vaccinated. Oh, and great news, Michigan as a state just surpassed 60% of all eligible people being vaccinated. So we are on our way to 70%, which is awesome. And it has been really, really wonderful to get out and see friends and family again and know that I'm able to do that safely. So with that, Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we will see